Hey, welcome everybody to the WellWaveNOW Backstory edition. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Victor Briere, who is our guest all the way from Italy. What part of Italy are you in?
I'm in Tuscany in a town called Montepulciano.
Oh my goodness, beautiful. No wonder you relocated over there. So that's a beautiful part of the world for sure. So we're excited to get to know you a little better. We're going to have you on for the full Well Wave Now podcast in the near future. But Victor, we wanted to learn a little more about you prior to having you on for that podcast and hear more about where you grew up.
Sure, absolutely. I grew up in Los Angeles. So I grew up in West Los Angeles and I had there's what's normal, right? But I had a relatively normal West Side Los Angeles upbringing, which means that, I lived in a nice neighborhood. Everything was very pleasant. I went to a prep school for high school. And as far as life went, it was the standard kind of American idea where you're okay unless you're sick. And I was mostly okay. Of course, I had the usual stuff, but I grew up until I was about 18-year-old without really any major medical issues. And so I was just considered a healthy young guy.
Yeah. Do you have any siblings, any relatives still in Los Angeles area?
I do. My parents still live in Los Angeles in the same area. The siblings have kind of scattered. So I'm in Italy, my sister's in England, and my brother's in Texas. Yeah.
Yeah, three different countries.
Different countries,
Texas being a
exactly.
separate country itself. So,
Texas and California are their
Republic of
own,
Texas.
the Republic of Texas. Yeah.
yep.
So yeah, we're all over the place.
So as you look back, although the family's kind of spread out, were there any traditions that you gathered from the family that perhaps you still practice and from your time growing up with them?
Traditions, I was big on Thanksgiving. I was a big Thanksgiving fan as a kid. So when I go back to the States, I try to do a little bit of a thing for that. Less and less over time, admittedly. But we celebrated both Christmas and Hanukkah. My mother's Jewish, father was Catholic. And so that kind of became a tradition in and of itself. We would celebrate both. And so now I try and convince everyone to come to Italy for Christmas because it's so beautiful here. So that, but to tell you the truth, we weren't like a super tradition heavy family. Um, we did the major stuff and lived life without super traditions. Yeah.
Well, so a um, untraditional life there, but you grew up healthy. So as you grew up kind of healthy and without major issues, what type of activities were you involved in the youth? Were you athletic? Were you into music? Did you go in the debate? What was your thing coming up there, Victor?
My family would say I was into debate, even though I never joined the debate team. And that was evidenced by the fact that I was a philosophy major in college. But I was athletic. So I played a lot of sports. I was never some like crazy good athlete. I was never going to get scouted, never played in a D1 school or anything like that. But I enjoyed it. So I was almost always physically active. Summer camp was sports camp. In high school, I ran track and played lacrosse. Middle school was a variety of activities, all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
physical activity was, yeah, a big part of my upbringing.
So who do you think was the biggest influence on your life growing up as a child?
How old are we talking? What age range? It changes depending on the range.
Yeah, that's why I say let's start with your childhood. Who was your biggest influence?
Okay, my biggest influence as a young, 6 to 12-year-old was my best friend, who's now actually a psychiatrist in New York,
Hmm.
and his name's Joe, and he's a great guy. We were inseparable during those years. We met in first grade, hit it off immediately, and that was it. I mean, we went to different middle schools and high schools, but it didn't matter. Every weekend, we knew what was going on. We were going to hang out.
That's cool. Now let's fast forward and say, in your adult years, who's your biggest influence?
Yeah, probably that same guy.
Okay.
But no, I've had many teachers over the years, and they've all been very, very big influences. I had some extremely wonderful teachers in college, professors who were big influences on my direction. And as opposed to any one person being an extremely huge factor, I think the quality that influenced me the most was when people would just get really honest about life with me, and talk to me without beating around the bush and share their life wisdom. And there were certain people who were, more inclined to do that than others, or felt comfortable doing that with me than others. And those people became the biggest influences.
All right, so let's move into your work world a little bit now. So
Sure.
taking that influence, and over time you've kind of evolved in your work. What would you call is the essence of your wellness work now, and what do you personally get out of it?
All right. So the essence of what I do in Ayurveda is the essence of Ayurveda, which is help someone live a long and healthy life. And I want to put an emphasis on the healthy there, because sure, we can go on Google and say, what's the average lifespan? And it's 78 for men or whatever it is now. And, 81 for women, or I don't actually know the exact numbers because that's not the point. The point in Ayurveda and what I do is how healthy can you stay as long as possible? And the definition of health in Ayurveda is very different than the definition of health I grew up with, which was you're healthy unless you're sick. In Ayurveda, that's not true. In Ayurveda, the bar is a lot higher. You're healthy if everything's running smoothly, all your sense organs are operating well, you're fully functional, and there's a mental component to it, you're happy. So only then can you call yourself a healthy person, is what Ayurveda says. And that's my goal, is to help people get as close to that as possible, knowing it's a very high bar.
And then what do you get out of doing that?
I get a few things out of it. It's my living, right? So I make my money via that modality, but that's not why I get into it. There are a lot of livings I could do that would make me a lot more money. What I really get out of it is the feeling of purpose, that I'm actually helping people with something real, tangible, that makes a very visible and clear difference in the quality of something fundamental in their life. Without health, most other stuff goes out the window to at least a degree, a large degree in a lot of cases. And being able to see the ripple effect of that, not only on the people I help, but on their entire family and circle, is pretty incredible.
So tell me how you transitioned from philosophy into wellness.
Well, the transition happened when I was 18. I was pretty healthy up until 18. And then when I went away to college, I started getting this back problem. And, like I said, I was a pretty physical guy. I liked being physically active. At the time, I was playing a lot of tennis. That was my sport of choice. And I had this thing behind my left shoulder blade that was just this nagging irritation. It was not extreme pain. It wasn't crippling. I could still live. But it was there and present and consistent and annoying. And it was not really going away, getting better. So I went to college close by to my home. I went to the Claremont colleges, which was about 45 minutes from LA. And I started seeing doctors because that's what I knew how to do. And, they checked me out. They did the MRI, did the X-ray, went to physical therapy. I get sent to, I think, 6, 7, 8 doctors, something like that. I didn't count. But eventually I got to a neurologist. And the neurologist was at UCLA, which Breck, I'm sure you know very well. And he did some tests, and everything came back negative. They started testing me for more and more exotic stuff, right? Like muscular dystrophy and all that. And he sat me down, and this kind of ties into the honest thing, right? He was very honest with me, and I really appreciate it. He said, look, we're not going to help you. You don't have a critical condition. You're not in severe pain. This isn't life-threatening. Basically, I can give you painkillers, or you can do exploratory surgery, which will honestly probably end up not revealing anything at all. And I said, whoa, because I'd never experienced that before, right? I didn't understand. And I was like, okay. So I took him at his word, and I went back to college, and I was like, okay, well, I have to do something. I don't want to live with this for the rest of my life. So I started looking at other things. I went to a massage therapist just to try it. And that massage therapist sent me to a yoga class. And I went to a yoga class. And actually, after the yoga class, I noticed like a little difference, I was like, that did something. And so I talked to the yoga teacher one-on-one, and I said, I want to do a session with you and have you tell me what to do. So she agreed, and we did a 1-hour session. She gave me 3 yoga postures to do. And within like a week and a half, it was gone. And I had been struggling with this for over a year. And now I know that's not the story that everyone gets. That was good fortune or whatever. I had the type of thing that could be affected by that. But what it did for me was it opened up my mind to the world that there is more than what I grew up with. There are systems of medicine and health that don't look at everything exactly the same way as the allopathic system does. And that there's power in them, at least to some degree, because I experienced it myself. So that piqued my interest, and I started traveling. I started exploring Eastern philosophy at that point, as well as Western philosophy. And over time, to make a long story short, I started learning about Ayurveda and decided to make that profession from being a real estate assistant. So, yeah. So at the age of 24, I jumped into Ayurveda and made that my full-time profession.
Wow. Wow. That's been a lot of years. So that's amazing. So, do you ever have bad days or challenging days? And if you do, how do you motivate yourself to keep going?
Yeah, I mean, definitely all the time. Disease in whatever form, whatever modality you look at it in is tough. It's like pushing a boulder up a hill, and it's like pushing a boulder up a hill that's intelligent and trying to roll down the hill actively. It's not like, just brute force that gets you there. And so you see a lot of failure, what I would call failure. And then you see success and then failure. And then you see more success and then more failure. It's a roller coaster, as I'm sure you guys have experienced yourself many times. And that is, I think anyone who's in any healing profession understands it when I say there's a certain kind of fatigue that sets in when you just hit the wall so many times. And not only that, people resist their own healing like crazy in very subtle and subconscious ways, like dietary change, right? So there's all that, and that's a huge challenge. But I think at the same time, that challenge acts as a huge motivation not to quit for myself. Because it's like, no, these are real problems people are having. They're not made up. There's an answer, even if that answer is psychosomatic, right? Partly dealing with the personality and mind, and partly dealing with the body and how those things are integrated. There are reasons people are so angry or sad, or things that are driving physiological responses, or however you want to say it. And personally love trying to find some of the keys to those locks.
That challenge, finding the key to the lock and helping people overcome those challenges keeps you motivated. But now, do you have a dream project that's motivating you right now?
Yeah. One of the keys that I've discovered is, for years, in my Ayurvedic clinic in California, there was very frequently an underlying health issue of metabolic issues, meaning weight and blood sugar imbalances. So someone would come in, I got a rash on my arm, I have hyperacidity, my leg hurts, my kidney function, my whatever, right? And they want a pill, fine. Okay. They want herbal supplements, fine. They're willing to change your diet to an extent, but underlying that is, just to be honest, they're either overweight or obese. And as a holistic practitioner, meaning I have to deal with the whole system in order to create balance within the system, and then that is the force that generates healing or vitality. That can't be ignored in a holistic system. So, Ayurveda doesn't work in the same way allopathy does. It doesn't have a pill that just overrides a function of a system and sets it straight for a period of time. So yeah, sure, herbs can do that to a degree, but they don't nearly have the force that like metformin does or something like that, right? So I started to try and address this and realized how much resistance there is to taking on healthy lifestyle practices and dietary practices that create huge results. But what good are they if no one's going to do them? And instead of just saying, oh, well, that person's not motivated or that person doesn't really want it. I mean, that's a cop out, in my opinion, for a health professional, just to say that. I was like, no, there's a psychological process going on here that's sapping the motivation from them to get healthy. And so for years, I banged my head against the wall trying to understand how and why that works, and searching for teachers and people who understood. And finally, in the past few years, I've made serious headway on that and how to address and approach those kinds of imbalances with really great results. And that is my passion now in my project. I'm like full steam on making that as efficient and accessible to people as possible.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, are you ready for the fun facts and personal preferences, the rapid fire?
I'm
Here
ready.
we,
Bring it
here we
on.
go. All right. Are you more of an early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Okay. Do you prefer the mountains or the beach?
I live in Montepulciano, which means mountain town. So
Okay, excellent. And do you prefer coffee, tea, or something else?
tea.
Tea, awesome. Well, we appreciate you being our guest today on the backstory for Well Wave Now, and look forward to having you on the full podcast, Victor. It's been a pleasure to get to know you better, and wanted to remind our listeners that there's tons of resources for you on the Facebook group. Go to the Healthcare Disruptors WellWave Now group and join, as well as join us every Tuesday afternoon for the live WellWave Now. So thanks again for being our guest. And remember, wellness, it's in you.